Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of It's So Wonderful podcast. It's episode 66, and perhaps fittingly, we've got a horror movie today. Because, I don't know if this show will get to 666 episodes. I'd like to think it will, at which point we will do the most satanic of all satanic movies possible. Maybe some sort of fun folk horror. Oh, folk horror is so good. But, yeah, episode 66 today, we have a horror for you. And we also have a new guest on the show. She's never been on before. It's been about, I don't know how many years since we did any sort of show. We have done them in the past. But I'm struggling to remember it has been that long. Ashley Davis, hello, welcome, yay.
Thank you so much for having me. I want to say the last time we did anything was maybe like Get Out. I don't even remember.
Oh, wow, yeah, that was on a
different show.
on a different show,
Yeah.
on an older show, on a show that I would still very much like to bring back one day in some sort of format. Once, technical ability gets a little bit stronger and the ability to acquire better recording equipment, which is a difficult thing to do, but we make it work.
Yeah, we do.
We make it work, Ashley. So why don't you go ahead and tell everybody what this movie is you have picked for today?
All right, so I picked the 1968 classic Night of the Living Dead, George A. Romero, his first film, and a film that really reset the zombie genre. Before zombie films were more like voodoo and mysticism based, and this one set the modern precedent of like the slow moving, the flesh eating, and it's just a great movie.
It really is. It's also kind of unusual that we're doing a movie like this on this show, because this show, of course, focuses on a certain era in movies that you would perhaps call the studio system, mainly. If not, some pre-code, some silent, and yes, we've delved into the 70s a little bit and into more independent movies a little bit. But it's not what we usually focus on this show, so I'm very excited to actually talk about kind of one of the granddaddies of independent American movies with Night of the Living Dead. And
Yeah,
that's one of the... It's one of the many reasons I love this movie, is the fact that it is such a seminal independent movie coming out right in 1968, right as the studio system was ending. And it is the whole feel of it is just, it's the perfect independent movie, I feel. But before we maybe talk about this, you did mention zombie movies, of course, before Night of the Living Dead were voodoo movies. How do you feel about voodoo zombies? Are you a fan of voodoo zombies?
See, I didn't really grow up watching a lot of those older zombie movies, so I'm definitely used to everything that came after Night of the Living Dead, so I kind of prefer that because that's what I know, but it totally makes sense with like the voodoo culture that would, be associated with zombies and whatnot. So, I mean, I think the only one I've seen is I think it's White Zombie.
I think that's the only one I've seen as well with Bela Lugosi.
Mm-hmm.
And Bela Lugosi has a very nice goatee in that movie, and that's probably the only reason I actually watched it. Just to see Bela Lugosi's goatee, because you know me, I have a weird fascination with classic movie actors and their facial hair. It's
a lot
weird
of them
thing.
had some pretty rockin' facial hairs. So I mean, Vincent Price. I mean,
look, there's a reason we have the Mustache Hall of Fame on this show. The Mustache Hall of Fame is legendary in these circles, and it commemorates such facial hair as, usually it doesn't go into beards or goatees, but I digress. I think White Zombie is the only voodoo zombie zombie movie I've ever watched as well, and I liked it to a point, but it is very different when you're so used to watching what we think of as zombie movies, which of course all comes from Night of the Living Dead and the kind of the dead raising up due to some sort of radiation, which isn't obviously the main focus of the movie.
No, it's more like an afterthought. It's like we think it may be this, and they interview some scientists who, like, one of them is real cagey about, no, don't say anything. And the other guy's like, no, like, it's totally this Venus probe that's come back, but it's never like 100% yes, this is why it's happening, and now it's going to stop as the radiation deteriorates. It just kind of ends on such a bleak note, really.
Oh, absolutely it does. And we'll certainly get to the ending of this movie, which I think is one of the probably most brutal, unforgiving endings to any horror in the history of that great genre. But another thing I absolutely love about Night of the Living Dead is just the fact that in a lot of zombie movies, it is kind of all about finding the cure, finding what's happening, getting to understand why this has happened. And that's not the case with Night of the Living Dead. In fact, that's kind of not the case with any George Romero zombie film. It's very much just puts a load of people in a situation and has them deal with what's happening.
And the need to survive
stuff comes from. And the need to survive, exactly.
And the different, like, personalities at play. It's not one of those situations where it's like, we all have to get along in this house or this mall or whatever, because if we don't, we won't survive. It's like, no, I have a big personality, you have a big personality, I have the gun, you don't, so who are we going to listen to here? Because they both think they're right.
There's certainly a lot of arguing in Night of the Living Dead. It might as well be called Argument the Movie. Community Arguments, the movie, which is essentially what Night of the Living Dead is. But let's go some of your really nice thoughts on this movie. What are some of your standout elements to Night of the Living Dead? What makes you love this one so much?
I first saw this when I was in high school. I can't remember exactly how old I was, but yeah, definitely, high school age. I saw it at my sister's house, and she was always the one, her and her husband, to show me movies that maybe I should not have seen. And not that this one is particularly scary, but it does definitely give you that overwhelming sense of dread throughout, because we start off with like Barbara and her brother at the cemetery, and she's taking things very seriously, and he's just totally goofing off. So I love the little dynamic that we get with them, and then suddenly, there's one of them now. They're coming to get you, Barbara, that classic line, and then everything just kind of hits in full motion from there. Oh no, this dude is he's devouring people. Oh my God, what is happening? And then her daring escape. And then I found this house. And it's always a creepy house in every movie.
Oh, yeah.
Some kind of creepy location. And then she gets there, and then that's when we're introduced to Ben, the main protagonist, the real hero of the piece. And he's the one that's very decisive, very cool and collected. Okay, we need to board these up. We need to do this. And I just really like that about his character, and also the fact that Dwayne Jones was cast because he was the best actor for the job, and they didn't really care about that he was African American. It was just okay, this is the best guy, and we're not really going to rewrite the part to reflect any of that. We're just going to let it be. And Dwayne Jones did kind of tone down some of the dialogue because the character was originally written as more of a rough trucker type. But I thought it was very good representation because, really, and before this time, not a lot of African-American protagonists and a lot of African-American roles, unless it was something with Sidney Poitier, was usually very stereotypical. So to see a non-stereotypical role, very refreshing.
Especially in a horror movie, where there are certain stereotypes about horror movies when it comes to non-white cast members. The start of this movie is so bold and just so memorable because it sets you up to think that Barbara and her glorious glasses-wearing brother, who's just a complete goofball, are the leads. It sets you up completely that they are the leads. They're coming to get you, Barbara. He still has the most famous line in the movie.
Yeah.
So fair play to that guy, because he does that. But he gets killed off 2 minutes in.
Yeah, and she still thinks that, like, he's out there, but clearly, like, he hit his head pretty hard on, like, a rock or, like, another, like, you know, cemetery marker. So, like, you knew, like, as the audience member, like, this dude's dead. She needs to get out of there, and he has the keys. She can't get the keys, otherwise she's going to put herself in peril. So she actually does some quick thinking by putting the car in neutral, and thank goodness they were on a hillside cemetery, because otherwise her plan would not have worked.
Yeah, I mean, God forbid you were in a flat piece of land, in which case, absolutely screwed. And she's dead at that point as well. And also, even Barbara doesn't have that much to do for the rest of the movie.
She's pretty catatonic throughout, and it's kind of unfortunate because, you know, you want to see, like, you know, the, you know, female character as well having some agency, but it totally makes sense why she behaved that way because the trauma that she just faced.
Yeah, she's in complete shock for the whole movie, and it's very well performed by her, because to sustain that believable level of shock for an entire movie is just, like you said, catatonic shock almost, is really quite impressive.
And it probably helps that they're in that contained farmhouse as well. It's not like they're there for weeks. It's like that one night that they're trying to figure out everything. So the structure helps.
Then, like you said, of course, Dwayne Jones comes into play as Ben, and another bold choice, obviously, even though it's not obviously played up. Nobody cares what his race is. That's not a big deal. But it's the very fact that he is a black lead in 1968 in a horror movie, something that had never been seen before, and is just another very bold choice by George Romero for the time, and it is such it's just a seminal movie for all these reasons, and it should be revered for making such a choice. It's such an important movie.
Well, it's
in
so important.
The history of horror, let alone movies in general, but in the history of horror, it's so important for that reason.
Yeah, it's so important that it is in the Library of Congress, like, it's preserved. So, I mean, they put it in the library in, like, 1999, so, yeah.
We can never let Night of the Living Dead die. It should be viewed by centuries of people, and those who prefer Dawn of the Dead, and I know pretty much everybody that I seem to speak to about the George Romero zombie movies are always like, yay, Dawn of the Dead's great, maybe because it's in colour and it's a bit gorier, and it's just kind of a bit more fun. Night of the Living Dead will always be my favourite. It's just brutal, it's dark, it's grim, it's gritty, it's dramatic, and it's just got this kind of terrifying mood to it, and not a lot has to happen for it to create that. Everything moves kind of slowly, everything moves as slow as the damn zombies do.
Although there are some instances where the zombies seem to be a little fast, it's like, okay, is he reestablishing fast zombies now? Because that guy he's got a lot of speed.
It was 50 years early in establishing fast zombies there. But that's just another thing that I love about this movie, is the effects. And the fact that it is kind of a little bit gory in some parts. It's very impressively done. I know that it's obviously like they're eating like, what was it, ham covered in chocolate syrup or something
chocolate
like that?
syrup was a lot of the stand-in for blood, which, again, because it's a black and white film, smart choice to go with that, even though commercially that was not a viable film format in 1968, because a lot of the industry and television had gone to color. But I think it really adds to the atmosphere of the film, and a lot of the props were like leftover lunch or like hamburger or ham, and they actually had real entrails too. It's like, oh my gosh, it's so just...
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah, the guerrilla filmmaking aspect of this movie, I think you can see like throughout the final production. They had like so many people working so many different roles, whereas somebody might be an actor, but they might also be the makeup artist, or they might have been like a real like broadcast, journalist that they had somehow got to be in the movie. Like, I think the guy that was the reporter on TV, like, he really did work for a TV station. He wrote all of that news copy, so that's why it sounds so authentic. If George and his writing partner had tried to write that, they wouldn't have been able to capture that authenticity versus someone who's like, they're actually in that job. So
Look, authenticity is another great word. It comes across so clearly, and it makes it feel very, very real. Just the fact that it is this, like you said, guerrilla filmmaking, and I love that kind of term. Of course, very similar to Texas Chainsaw Massacre in that way, from 74, in the sense that it feels like the actual style of filmmaking makes the movie feel is the scariest thing about the movie, really, is the actual style it was filmmaking. The very fact it is so low budget is what makes this movie stand above so many others. And that's a testament to George Romero's quality as a filmmaker, his dedication to what he was doing, and I adore the man. I love George Romero so much.
And the fact this is his first feature and he's trying out all these things, like, we don't need Hollywood to give us permission to make this movie. We're just going to make a movie. Like, we have the film stock, we have the cameras, we have people. I know this guy, We're going to start our production company, and somebody will show this eventually. And they did eventually find a distributor, of course. It wasn't like a major distributor, but somebody that was willing to not make them like recut the ending, because that's what some of the other ones wanted. They did not like the grim ending of the movie. It's like, this is too grim for us. They're like, no, I'm not going to change it.
No. Stick to your guns, George Romero. George Romero has been bold up to this point. Why the hell would you think he would just be like, okay, we'll reshoot the ending? No, that is not what George Romero is all about at all. Let's talk about that ending right now, shall we?
Yes.
Actually, it's most unpleasant.
Yeah, you think everything is great because, like, we have Ben, and, like, he's the one that's been calling the shots. Now, some of his ideas did not pan out with, like, trying to get the car, because, like, they can't stay. At first, it's like, okay, we can stay at the house. We're safe in the house. But then the news said, no, like, you need to get to a station, and we have all these different places that are safe, where there's weapons, there's medical care. Like, okay, if we could just get gas in the truck, then we'll somehow get to this town, because some of the other characters, Tom and Judy, I believe, they were the ones that had lived in town, so they kind of knew the area better. And, like, they end up, like, getting cooked in their truck because of a gas misfire and flames, and, just horribleness. And then...
horribleness.
Harry and Helen Cooper, like, their daughter, Karen, was already injured. And what I like about this movie, it's not the fact that you get bit by a zombie, even though they call them zombies or ghouls or flesh eaters or them. It's just the fact...
The living dead.
The living dead. It's the fact that you just die. It doesn't matter how you die, you will turn into one of them. And the daughter had already been hurt, and they couldn't get care for her, so then, like, after all this drama between Harry and Ben trying to fight for dominance, like, she dies, she attacks her father, then attacks her mother, and it's just so gruesome. And Ben had talked so much about how the cellar was the worst place that they could be. But then he has to go there because there's literally nowhere else to go. The zombies break through into the living room. Barbara gets taken out by her brother, and he has to hide the night by himself. And you think everything's going to be great. comes out, we see this band of vigilantes, so to speak. Although I think some of them are police officers, but the zombie hunting crew that come through.
Yeah, call them zombie hunters.
They come through, they
Zombie
start
hunters.
shooting people, and it's very eerie. These guys seem way too into how many people they've killed when they talk to the news reporter. We know where this is going, and he's like looking out the window, and they're like, oh, there's one, and just like kill him, blank in the head, he's dead. And like as a kid, like seeing that, like at 14, 15, 16-year olds, like, what? I'm not used to movies ending this way, but that's what made it so memorable for me, and why that's always stuck with me, is just the audacity to end it so ironically, which I love. I'm sad because Ben deserves so much better. Those people needed to check. Like, clearly the zombies were not holding guns. Like, you could tell better. But no, those people are essentially, like one of the documentaries I was watching about this movie called Birth of the Living Dead, like, talk about, basically it comes across like a lynch mob. And
it absolutely does.
And I definitely took it that way when I was, in high school. Like, oh, like they killed him because of this. But really, that's the original ending before they even cast the actor. So it was always going to be bleak.
It was always going to be like that. It just kind of makes it more impactful now, especially, of course, being the time of release is 1968.
This was just after
This
was just after Martin Luther King was assassinated. Like, after the movie had been like filmed before that happened, and then like when they were editing and such before it was released, that had happened. Yeah,
exactly. Pretty pivotal time in U.S. civil rights. The 1968, the late 60s, to have something like this happen at the end, where this, like we said, lynch mob style gang of people seem very, very into killing the zombies, and then don't even stop to think when they just see somebody and they just shoot him. And then made, of course, more impactful by the fact that it is Dwayne Jones, an African American, playing the role, and then the sort of the final moments are still images,
but they're so brutal.
Sort of, dissolved together. Yeah, that's where the real grim stuff kind of, that's where it leaves you feeling very, very uncomfortable. And it does feel sort of perfect for the time in which it came out, to have an ending like that. But like you said, also makes it so memorable in the fact that it is just so unforgiving, and to the characters, to Ben, who you've loved throughout the whole movie, kind of, as this guy just trying to do what he thinks is right, and not seemingly getting anywhere from anybody, and just people just arguing with him when you're kind of agreeing with him with a lot of the stuff. Like you said, board up the windows, board up the doors. No, don't do that. Don't. He's like, no, obviously board up the windows.
Yeah, because
board up the windows.
He's right. If they just stay in the cellar and there is no out, like, that is a choke point. So it's like a last-ditch effort thing. You shouldn't just hide in there. And they couldn't even hear what was going on, or like Harry kept changing his story about like what he could hear. They didn't have a radio down there. They didn't have the television down there, so they couldn't get any news about like what to do. And
I mean, Harry is by far the most annoying character in the movie. He does not let up, thinking he is the Lord God Almighty and he knows all the best things that can possibly be done. I am Harry. I know best. And no, you don't, Harry. Shush.
And his wife is like, are you going to really do this? Like, you definitely get from some of the lines of dialogue that this is a marriage in trouble anyway, and this has just not been a good day. And another thing I just love about this movie is the fact that this was none of their house. Like, they all just randomly came to this farmhouse. The family was already dead, apparently, because we see, like, the body upstairs. It was so gruesome looking with the eyes bugged out. And they just all happened to come across this abandoned place that none of them had any stake in. And they just start tearing it apart to make it a fortress. It's like, I hope the family's not coming back, like they're on vacation or something. What happened to all of our furniture?
Oh, I've never thought about that in my entire life. What if there's just a kid just playing in the forest somewhere and he comes home to see his mum and dad and he just runs in and say, "Mummy, Daddy, what's happened? What's happened to my house?" That's horrible. That's terrifying. That's that should have been added to the movie. That would have made it. Oh God. That's made me look. That's made me think about Night of the Living Dead and that particular scene in a whole new light. And that's why I love doing this show. Sometimes it makes me think differently about certain movies that I have always had a very firm opinion about, very firm sort of way of thinking about. And I love that. I love that a lot. But yeah, like you said, Harry thinks the cellar's the best place.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, his daughter tells him that it's not the best place. By, daughter being all killy, murdery.
And that's some of the best imagery in the movie of her, like, coming, like, after her mother, and then, like, we don't see her, like, actually stab her mom, but it's more like the shadow and the splatter. And so just like the smart filmmaking of, like, well, we can't afford to make a dummy corpse and make this look good, so okay, silhouette, just kind of pulling from Hitchcock, like like in Psycho, like where you don't see the actual maiming of the character.
Perfect. You will never see me not want to see a shadow and a splatter in a movie, as opposed to potentially actually stabbing a dummy or CG or whatever it may be.
And even the sound design at that moment it sounds like horrible.
Oh, yeah.
Like, what is she stabbing into a pillow or something? But just that movie gives you a sense of dread throughout the whole thing. Even though you know what's gonna happen, you've seen it tons of times, you're still like, oh no, now they're gonna decide to leave. They should have never decided to leave.
The deep thud of a daughter stabbing her mother is unpleasant, and I understand that we keep saying that this movie is very unpleasant and very grim and very nasty and very unforgiving throughout this whole thing, but we seem very happy about this.
What does that say
Doesn't
about us?
Doesn't that tell you everything? What does that say about us, first of all? But what does that also say about the entertainment of this movie?
Well,
and the quality of this movie.
And the fact that, because there was no ratings, this is a pre-rating system, this was shown to children. Like, the horror genre was not something that had, a lot of clout and respect. So horror movies, we're okay, we'll drop the kids off at the theater, they're gonna watch a bunch of horror movies, and then this was one of the ones that they saw. And that's how it gained popularity, was through those little matinee showings and drive-in showings, as it wasn't real popular upon initial release. It was not very critically acclaimed upon initial release. A lot of people didn't get it. Like, what is this movie?
Because it was unlike anything they'd ever seen before.
Mm-hmm.
It was, like we said, it was really the first of the new wave of horror, of American horror at least, the first of the new wave of American horror in the late 60s, and one of those seminal films of the new wave of American cinema in general, after the end of the studio system, going into the early 70s. Obviously people bring up stuff like Easy Rider all the time as being the kind of the film to encapsulate that counterculture, new independent movie making style that brought us into the 70s, and that's why, of course, we get a load of weird, dark independent movies, famous independent movies of the 70s, is because the top quality directors were allowed to kind of make whatever movie they wanted now, and they decided to make horrendous character studies. Or, in terms of horror, started talking about the horror within people, rather than the horror
of monsters.
Of monsters or of war or stuff like that. It was very people focused, and that's why I always like 70s horror, because 70s horror, or I use the term 70s horror, but like I said, that really starts in 1968 with Night of the Living Dead. That's why I like that, because people are not nice in this new wave of American horror, and it has birthed some of the grimmest films, but also some of the most watchable horror movies. And that's how I love the era. As much as I love Universal Monsters for being creepy and fun and dark and moody, if you really want some horror movies that will stick with you and make you think about, oh God, does this human being live next door to me? You need to watch horror from the 70s. That's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say about that. That's just why I knew I'd get into some sort of weird I love 70s horror situation with this whole episode right now. And I'm happy. I'm happy that I did. I'm just very thankful to Night of the Living Dead for starting off essentially a new wave of American horror, because as we know, I am, the biggest horror fan this side of the moon. So, yeah.
I also appreciate the movie just for kind of like being the restart of a genre that's not based in, like, Dracula, obviously, like, that's classical literature, and just, with vampires, all those kind of things, werewolves, those kind of things that have, like, a past, and other art forms where zombies really do have their start in the cinema, even though there was clearly those ones from, like, the 1930s that are more mysticism and voodoo based. Like, this is just, like, environmental based, or sometimes some movies don't even explain it at all. It's just like something happened, and there have been so many great zombie movies, and everybody has to give credit to this one that started it all.
Absolutely. I mean, speaking of that, where I don't know how into ranking movies you are. I kind of famously am a little bit against ranking movies, but does this rank quite highly then on your zombie movies? Is it your flat out favourite?
I wouldn't say it's my flat out favorite. Shaun of the Dead is my flat out favorite, which of course pulls a lot from this, and I want to say, like, George Romero said that, like, Shaun of the Dead was, like, one of his favorite zombie movies. So, like, that's a huge love letter to everything that came before it. And I always stick to, like, more of the comedic take as my favorite, because satire is, like, my favorite genre of anything. I just love to see the tropes called out. I just enjoy that so much. But definitely this would be in, like, the, if Shaun of the Dead is number one for me, then this would definitely have to be this, a close second, or, like, right up there, because, again, we don't have Shaun of the Dead without this. We don't have anything without this.
No. So, are you saying you're in the same camp as me, where you prefer this to Dawn of the Dead, even though Dawn of the Dead is great in its own right?
Oh, yeah. I like this one better. I think this is more of an enjoyable watch than Dawn of the Dead.
Which is a weird thing to say, because Dawn of the Dead is kind of supposed to be a bit more of a fun movie.
Yeah, but it's
a bit more of a gore fest.
It just takes, they're, like, in that mall forever. Like, whereas this is, like, a very contained...
in the mall forever.
Yeah, like, this is a very contained story of, like, the one night that they try to survive. I like more of a contained story. That's just my preference. Other people may disagree, and that's fine. I just remember Dawn of the Dead is like, how is this movie still going? What cut are we watching of this?
Watching a 3.5 hour cut of Dawn of the Dead. It is not George Romero's original cut. It is some sort of weird other cut. No, but I get what you mean when it comes to Dawn of the Dead. There is certain sequences where it just seems like, oh, they're just kind of messing around in a mall now.
And of course there's a lot of fun, like, kills in that movie too. I think probably more fun kills in that one, but narrative wise, structure wise, I think Night of the Living Dead is a tighter film, which is funny because such a guerrilla style of filmmaking. They filmed it in 30 days. I think a lot of the dialogue was improvised. So the fact that it is cohesive, it's, good job on them. Because I don't think they did a lot of second takes because they didn't have they didn't have extra film stock to do that with.
I don't think they have the money for that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I'm sure I read somewhere once, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that the budget on this was $60,000.
I don't know exactly what the budget was, but it was very low, and they made I want to say 25, 250 times their budget or some astronomical number in the final sales numbers. And the fact that this movie accidentally got in the public domain because people forgot to put the copyright notices on the movie is such a shame.
Oh no.
Yes, because we saw this in the theater after George A. Romero passed. They did a special screening of it at the Draft House, and it was a free screening because they can't charge you for a public domain movie, but it was really cool. They did a lot of awesome featurettes before the movie because that's kind of what they're known for, and it was a fun time. I had never seen it on the big screen before, and my husband Joe, he had never seen the movie at all, so I was so excited to introduce it to him, and of course he loved it too. But just to see it on the big screen, if you can.
I'm certainly very glad Joe loved it.
Yes.
Come on, Joe. What are you doing waiting this long to see Night of the Living Dead?
I don't know. I was looking at him for all the different reactions, and then what did you think of the movie afterward? And we talked about it the whole way home. So
that sounds very much like the other show we have on this podcast feed, Morgan Hasn't Seen, where everybody looks at me for my reaction to movies that they are very fond of and love. Also, I like that. I would love to see Night of the Living Dead on a big screen. Oh, the graininess. Oh, Lord, the graininess.
Mm-hmm. They're supposed to be doing a restoration of it.
Screw restorations. I want to see a worse copy. I want to see a more gritty, horrible copy. I want to see a copy
of a copy.
I want to see this on film, and I want to scratch the film with my own hands just to make it look a bit nastier. I love stuff like that. I don't need no 4K restoration of Night of the Living Dead. Don't be giving me that. No.
Just give you a copy of the original copy, because the original copy got destroyed in a flood.
No.
Yeah.
No, I don't want that. I want the copy that came after that one.
Yeah.
The copy that, yeah. I mean, yeah. I don't need no fancy 1080p 4K restoration or whatever of Night of the Living Dead, or of any new wave American horror movie from the late 60s and the 70s.
Grittiness is what gives it the authenticity. You need that. It needs to look gross.
Exactly, we said before. The grittiness, like you said, gives it the authenticity, which makes the movie such a memorable movie, is the fact that it looks so authentic and looks like it's been filmed by some guy who who lives 3 doors down, and he's called Bob. Maybe not Bob, but he's at least called George, because he is called George.
Yeah, because I think he did some of the cinematography. I think he had to
wear
a lot. Yeah, he had to wear a lot of hats for this. So
there's no one else. He didn't have the money to pay other people to do this.
Yeah, no.
He did it all himself. And like we said before, with stuff like Texas Chainsaw Massacre as well, it's very similar in that sense. What Tobe Hooper did with that movie is make it very authentic, make it for very low budget. Everybody knows the stories from Texas Chainsaw Massacre and the horrendous shoot that Texas Chainsaw Massacre had. But it is that horrible quality. Like, if they came out with a 4K stupid restoration of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I would be protesting outside of wherever, being like, no, do not purchase this 4K restoration of this movie. See it in the worst possible copy. As long as you can see what's going on.
And you can hear the audio.
And you can hear it. Scratch it up a bit. Make it look a bit nasty.
You can't scratch up your DVD, because that doesn't work. If you scratch up your DVD, the movie will not work.
unless you scratch it up just a little bit. Because if you scratch it up just a little bit, sometimes on a DVD, you can get those little glitches in where the audio goes a bit off for like a second, and it makes it feel. No, I'm probably taking it a little too far.
Probably.
In my, I need some film stock. That's what I need.
I miss things that were shot on film. It looks so much better. I don't care. Like I don't care about like a lot of digital technology. I'm very weird in like my film taste, where I really love a lot of like big budget productions, but I also really love a lot of independent movies. And anytime if something is shot on film, I get so excited. Like even Detective Pikachu was shot on film. Did you know that?
Was it really?
Yes, it was shot on film. Yeah. I don't know how they managed to get all I mean, obviously they probably had to scan it in or something to do all the after effects, but it was shot on film.
That's crazy. I had no. I mean, I never saw Detective Pikachu, but I kind of want to after that. And I'm very similar to you in that sense. Yeah. I love seeing that something has been on film, because you can always tell. Because
it just has like a warmth quality to it. It feels more. I don't know.
Feels real, Ashley.
Yeah, like real. The Netflix movie Kodachrome, which is all about like, you know, a dying art form, that's shot on film, and it's so sad that it was released on Netflix. Like that should be in the theater, for real. Like I think it was at one festival, and then on Netflix.
That should be sold door to door by the guy who made it, just to give it that more authentic feel. You're selling out the creator of Kodachrome, selling it to Netflix. No. He has. They have to make them money. That's fine.
Oh yeah.
They have to.
Yeah, because I doubt that would have made a lot of money in the theater. But just for, you know, I just want to see that on the big screen, because it just feels like a crime that something that's shot on film is, you know, sent immediately to the streaming service.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose with TVs it can look as nice as
it still looks nice. Like you could tell that it was, you know, that it has that warmth to it, but.
Yeah.
I don't know, just to see it.
There really is something about shooting on film, and I know we have gone into somewhat of a lengthy discussion on the love of the actual look of film, but I like that. Maybe it's the fact that digital always seems very, very smooth and kind of not. It's always my argument of practical effects over CG.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, CG can look as smooth as it does, and it looks very smooth, and it's shot on digital, and it all looks so smooth and so seamless, but I want to see the seams sometimes. I want to see awkward edits sometimes where somebody has cut the piece of film with a sharp knife. And then I love seeing the little flickers that sometimes come in the corner of a movie.
Or like with if the film is like the little burn marks or whatever.
Yeah, burn marks, little flashes of white every now and again that just show up. The odd scratch in the middle of the screen makes it feel real, and that's why I always say about practical effects. And bringing it back to the Night of the Living Dead has excellent practical effects.
Mm-hmm.
Really excellent practical effects for such a low budget movie for 1968, just excellent. They look beautiful. They look perfect.
Yeah, you don't second guess anything like when they do like a CG effect in a modern film, or even practical effects if they don't put a lot of effort into them, like in modern horror movies, or even like 80s and 90s, some 70s horror. It's like, oh, like that like stands out in a bad way, but. The worst like practical effect in this movie, they have like a clay hand that's like coming through that gets like cut. Like I never knew that was a clay hand. I'm like, oh, like that's just like a hand that got messed up. Like it looks fine, and the fact that it is in black and white probably helps.
Yeah,
but you don't see it for very long. It's not like the main monster of the movie. And, like, all the zombie makeup looked really good because they weren't trying to go for, like, everybody looks super dead, because they're all freshly dead, so you just need to look a little tired, put a little makeup on.
Yeah, just a little tired.
Yeah,
some little black circles.
Yeah, that's what they do for the brother. He doesn't have his glasses, his hair's disheveled, and he has, like, really prominent eye bags. Like, that makeup is not hard to do. Even I could do that kind of makeup.
I mean, if I look like that when I'm dead, I'd be kind of happy if I just got away with having slightly dishevelled hair and black circles under my eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And, didn't have to rot into a horrible corpse and then come back to haunt the people that have wronged me in life, because obviously I'm some sort of vengeful ghost, and I'm okay with that. I've accepted my lot in life as a vengeful ghost, and I'm going to have to learn to take it. That's what you just said reminded me. Again, the idea that it is shot on black and white and the effects look fine almost because of that. Obviously, it's improved a lot in 10 years when George Romero made Dawn of the Dead. Obviously, you got Tom Savini doing all the effects in that, and so that they're just perfect as well, really. But practical effects obviously improved a lot throughout the 70s, and of course, really, really, made they were standout in the 80s. The 80s is kind of the era of really high quality practical effects, and then of course you go into some of the CG that started, and the practical effects didn't have enough time to be complete king of perfection in effects, I don't think, before Tron happened and everybody started wanting to use CG. Stupid Tron. Blame Tron for the death of practical effects. That's what I'm just going to say.
I would say it's probably more like Jurassic Park, because like even though it was a hybrid of practical and CG, like that's really like when CG, because they actually had the computing power to make it look not crazy.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I always think Tron because it's kind of computery, and it is obviously some form of very early CG. Jurassic Park is that leap forward, but I can't blame Jurassic Park because Jurassic Park's so good, and I don't like to blame Jurassic Park, and it also does use practical effects, so yay,
yes,
Jurassic
it does.
Park.
Yeah, I mean the T-Rex, that's a real model that they like life-size portion, but any kind of like dinosaurs are running, those are CG.
Yeah.
But any kind of close-up dinosaur, that's a practical effect. But yeah.
But,
I love Jurassic Park. That's one of my favorite movies. So I'm just saying, that's probably
absolutely.
what really ushered it in. I would think Tron is like the early one where it's like, oh, that looks really cool, but it still looked like, if you look at it now, it looks super awkward.
I mean, yes, it does. But we should remember Tron for being a very early CG movie, a precursor to what happened in Jurassic, a precursor to what was accomplished with Jurassic Park. If we didn't have that, we wouldn't have Jurassic Park. Much like if we didn't have Night of the Living Dead, we wouldn't have all of the other wonderful zombie movies we do have. But the one point I did want to bring up with the whole black and white aspect is that Night of the Living Dead would of course look absurd if it was in colour. And this reminds me of the time that I tried watching one of my favourite movies, which is House on Haunted Hill, which is Vincent Price. It was the first Vincent Price movie I ever watched. I still think it's the best Vincent Price poster you can possibly purchase, is the House on Haunted Hill poster. I tried watching that in colour. I found a colour version on Amazon Prime, and I did not care for the colour version.
There is a color version of
changed.
This movie too. I have not tried to watch it because I hate like that whole the whole Ted Turner colorized classics, like trying to hand paint them, and like obviously like a lot of early film, like from early cinema, like those were hand painted color before, in the silent era, but in the Code days, they didn't they were in black and white. They did not hand paint them. So why are we doing it now? Don't ruin the movie. They always look, and it's always the faces that look so bad, like the skin tones.
It is, because it isn't shot in glorious Technicolor. Mm-hmm. Because glorious Technicolor, a movie that is shot in glory, I always have to say glorious.
Oh no, that's it's required. If you don't say it, then is it really Technicolor?
Exactly. If a movie is shot in glorious Technicolor, it is made to look like it has to be shot in colour. You can watch a technical movie in black and white and it would look awful. You wouldn't get anywhere near as much out of it. And like you said, with some of the silent movies as well that have been hand painted, like I know, like Phantom of the Opera has that one. Phantom of the Opera has a really weird production in general, the Lon Chaney one. But there's a little bit of colour in some versions of that you can see, and it looks really cool. It looks really weird, but it's really cool. And I love that sort of stuff. Anything silent, because it's just got that really off, eerie vibe to it. It just speaks to me a lot.
Yeah, there's when you see all the scratches and whatnot because of the quality of the print that they could find.
Yeah.
And the fact that those things would catch on fire in the movie theater. And a lot of fire precaution. Had, silver nitrate's very flammable. The projectors are hot. Yeah, this is a disaster waiting to happen.
I mean, film is a very dangerous thing.
Yes.
Do not store a lot of nitrate film in your basement. Your house will catch on fire and you will perish. And there is my lesson for the day. But yeah, don't watch House on Haunted Hill in colour. It's weird. Just watch the black and white version. It looks so much better. And I watched the black and white version after it, and because I feared that I didn't like House on Haunted Hill anymore. But I was all okay after watching the proper version again. And
yeah,
I made myself feel okay, and I could sleep happy, and not be up for the next 3 weeks worrying that I didn't like that move, because that's the kind of thing that I would probably do. And it's weird. Ashley, do you have any final thoughts on Night of the Living Dead or any of the other ridiculous wonderfulness we've talked about in this episode?
This movie is just so great. Like you said earlier, the very beginnings of independent filmmaking. The beginning of one of my favorite genres in film, the zombie genre, even though, again, they're not called zombies in the movie. They're ghouls or them or whatever.
The people, them. Just a fine film. If you've never seen it, even though, we didn't give away the ending. We didn't give away the whole journey, though. So no, we did not. Spoilers for a movie that is 51 years old.
Yeah, exactly. If you haven't seen it, definitely. It's on, I know in the United States it's currently on Prime. There's also the documentary that I mentioned, Birth of the Living Dead, is also on Prime. So I don't know if that's worldwide, but if you're in the United States, you can watch both of them if you have that Prime subscription. I highly recommend it. The documentary was very enlightening about the process and how Romero felt about even not addressing the fact that Dwayne Jones is African American. It's like, oh, maybe we should have done something with that. And of course, Dwayne Jones has since passed away, so we can't ask him how he would have felt about that. But just the fact that Romero was we could have done better. And that to me, that makes a great filmmaker, that that you could have improved, but then you don't go back and mess up your movie, because you can't re-edit things, you can't change the past as much as certain filmmakers like to try to put new CGI in or whatnot. You know what I'm talking about. You can't do that, yes. but you can take those lessons and do better next time. So it was wonderful to hear him talk. He's a wonderful person.
It is the dedication, it is the humility and the boldness of George Romero that really makes him a true great director in the best genre in movie history, which was an awkward sentence, but I said it anyway, because that's just what I tend to do. But yes, echoing all that Ashley said, Night of the Living Dead is such an important movie in movie history, especially in horror history. And go and watch the documentaries. Horror documentaries are always really interesting. I always find them the most, maybe that's just because I'm a big horror fan, but I always find them so much more interesting than any other movie documentary. It's because there's just so much dedication that goes into a horror movie. I think horror's the one genre that you can call yourself a fan of and not be a fan of any other genre. You could just, like, you know what you're getting into when you speak to a horror fan, but, like, who's a comedy fan? Everyone?
That's such a broad category, or drama or romance, but horror is a very distinct set of tropes, and
Yeah.
it's fun when a movie plays with those tropes. It's fun when a movie just plays into them. There's so many different types of horror movies. It's not just like one size fits all. If you're like more cosmic horror, there's movies for you. If you like monsters, there's movies for you. If you like more psychological, and there's something for everybody. So just don't discount the whole genre because I don't want to be scared.
No.
And I know that's something I got to get over because I used to be like that for a long time. Like I would get scared of like everything, but I've started to discover that I really like a lot of horror movies that I didn't think I would like. So, and I credit that to people like you and like our friend Kimber for like broadening like my horizon on that. So thank you.
Well, Ashley, that warms my horror-loving heart, truly. And I love that so much. You did fail to mention, however, my favourite subgenre of horror, which is, of course, folk horror, which is the best genre.
So like The Witch?
Of all time. Like The Witch. I have been asking quite a few people this recently because I'm still yet to talk properly about it with anyone. Have you seen Midsommar?
I have not seen that yet, but that's definitely on my list. I was actually in Austin not too long ago, and I joked about, because my husband wasn't going to be with me, it's like, I'll just go see Midsommar by myself, because I didn't think he wanted to see that, because like he's not like super into horror as well, but it's starting to grow on him as well as we've been introduced to different movies, and he's like, don't see that without me. I'm like, okay, fine. And we were going to go see it, but all the screenings were super full, so we saw The Art of Self-Defense instead, which also a real fun movie. Definitely, has some gory aspects to it.
I am very proud of the city of Austin for selling out its screenings of Midsommar. I'm very proud of Joe for wanting to see Midsommar. And please see Midsommar, it's the best movie of the year. Folk horror is strong, and I'm so thankful. Yes. That's all I have to say. That is all I have to say. This has been another wonderful episode of It's a Wonderful Podcast. Episode 66, which is fitting that we did a horror movie because, 6s mean something to do with horror, right? I don't know, maybe. Speak to the man downstairs. Not the man upstairs. He won't give you any advice at all. He won't tell you. It's like the Jedi and the Sith, right? You can only learn certain things from the Jedi, but you can learn everything from the Sith. That's why maybe my own mind is weird. Probably existential crisis is probably a good time to finish the episode. Guys, thank you for listening to another episode of It's a Wonderful Podcast. You can find the show on Twitter at It's a Wonderful One, where you can talk to us about the show, about this show, about Morgan Hasn't Seen. Use the hashtags for both shows, It's a Wonderful One or hashtag Morgan Hasn't Seen, to talk to us about the stuff that happens on the shows. Find the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Podbean, Castbox, Google Podcasts, and all the other places that you will probably listen to podcasts on. I feel like if you're not using one of those, then what sort of weird podcast format are you using that nobody's ever heard of? I don't know, but, yay, listeners. Leave those 5-star rating reviews on Apple Podcasts, and make sure you download and share around and tell everybody that you love the show and that you wish they loved the show too, and then get them to listen to the show, because hell, if they don't love it, they've listened, and that will make me happy, because this is all really about making me happy. It's not about anything else. I'm very selfish like that. No, that's not actually true at all, but you can find me on Twitter if you want me to be a bit more selfish, at the Purple Dawn, with a 3 instead of the E in the, because 3 is the magic number, or on Instagram at the Purple Dawn. Ashley, where can the people find you? What have you got going on? plug all the good stuff.
All right, so you can find me on Twitter at @_Mrs. Davis if you want to hear my opinions on all sorts of topics, all sorts of movies or education or whatever, because I am a classroom teacher as well as somebody that thinks they know enough about film to talk about it sometimes on shows like this. You could also find my YouTube channel at youtube.com/geektomynerd, where my husband and I host a lot of different shows. We're movie related. We also have some game streams and other little content. So if you like really nerdy and geeky things, you might find something you like there. We have all sorts of reviews of all the Marvel movies. We did a series on the Rocky movies, which of course started from that 70s like auteur movement with Sylvester Stallone, writing the script, eventually taking on the role as director and subsequent sequels. And we had never seen any of those before, so that was a fun dive into that franchise that is such a cultural icon in America. If you want to follow me on Instagram, I'm Shakespeare_girl, I think is my Instagram handle. If you'll find it eventually. You'll see me talking about movies. We also have...
Yes, sorry.
And we also have a Geek to My Nerd Instagram.
Perfect. Go and follow Ashley on all the good stuff there. She and Joe are wonderful. They're both wonderful. And they do some really cool stuff. And it's all cool. And it's great. And you should check it out as well. If you don't already, go and follow her. Because we love her. And it's been great to have you on. Ashley, I want to thank you again for coming on to It's a Wonderful Podcast. I'd love to have you back.
I would love to be back. Because I had like a long list of movies that I totally wanted to talk about.
Yes.
So, because a
lot of those other movies were very, very, very interesting movies as well, and I would also love to talk about those. That's why I do this show. That's why we do this show here, because we love talking about these older movies. Because screw new movies, they're the worst. Apart from Midsummer, which is great. That might as well be the motto for the whole show. But yeah, that is going to do it for another episode of It's a Wonderful Podcast. Until next time, guys, thank you again to Ashley Davis for being on. Go and check her out on all the good stuff she's got going on, because she's great. And until next time, bye.